Introduction: when stars fill half the sky. His ship strained against that remarkable pull of gravity from a force claiming the lives of just about everyone he'd ever known. Peering through a side portal, aghast at the merciless monster, the traveler saw for the first time with his own eyes the singularity known as Omega. It continued to eat everything from every direction for 1,000,000 gigaparsecs. Stars and planets, reduced to streams of splintered matter and light, were now strewn across his once friendly neighborhood star system. All of it devastated by the horrible and interminable strength of Omega's event horizon. For 100,000 years, they were convinced they could escape this impending doom. Ships were built and launched in coordinated attempts to escape this formidable foe that proved to be too ominous, too daunting, and too overwhelming, even for such an advanced world, the place known as Gothawit. More recently, they suffered massive floodings, cyclones, and earthquakes, all byproducts of this forthcoming event. But now, with both of its moons ripped from their faithful orbits, their homeworld could no longer sustain life. He was one of the last to leave, with his ship climbing quickly through the atmosphere into the blackness of space. He finally viewed the unhindered and quite unnerving scape of stars filling half the sky. Now, suddenly gripped by the same force that claimed so many others, the traveler immediately employed new protocols and maneuvers, propelling him away from Omega and into the outer darkness. For the moment, he breathed a sigh of relief. His name was Silta, a chief scientist, a figure of notoriety for many in his world. At the moment, he was safe, but that could all change in an instant if only one of 1,000 variables were found to be even the slightest bit out of balance in this new dance between life and death. He scanned his readings, reviewing his status. As far as he knew, he'd accomplished something no one else could. Silta was moving away from the event horizon, but for how long he could not tell. Time passed. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. No change. From his aft portal, he watched the light from the debris field getting smaller and smaller. That was a good sign, but it was his only sign, for there was no other reference. Ahead, nothing but sheer darkness, nothing to gauge against, nowhere to navigate to. To survive was his only compass. But now, in this new reality, even the will to survive was being challenged by the endless days of nothingness and utter silence. At first, hope glimmered that perhaps another traveler might have found a way to escape. Before his launch, he knew of at least 7 others who had the same applied knowledge as him. But with each passing second, every surviving ship would not only be moving away from the event horizon, but also away from him. Regularly, he hailed on all communication frequencies, but to no avail. No one answered. He grew tired of the repetitive drone of his own words. He would mock himself, curse himself, and ridicule the cloistered echoes of each unresolved call. There was only one recourse for Silta, a form of time travel available to the Gothawidans through a mysterious substance they called Moracell. It was a plant brought to their world long ago by another traveler known as Perkel, the progenitor of a collective group of souls. He taught the Gothawidans how to cultivate and exploit the Moracell, developing it into their major source of energy. But it was much more than firewood. One of its mysterious powers was its ability to offer a new level of consciousness. They called it the half-realm. It was like a drug, causing the subject to fall into a trance where they would enter a place where knowledge, emotions, and experiences of others could be clearly and precisely shared. In this place, Time was no limiting factor, for they could view the lives of people who lived long ago and connect with them as if they were still alive. Although unable to interact with them, they were still able to see and feel everything. But this strange portal to wherever or whenever had a very discriminating taste, for it would only allow a very selective group of Gthawatans to enter. Silta was one of them, although he was not sure why. Nonetheless, this gift propelled him in his society, awarding him with special privileges and liberties. Praised by many and envied by most, his life was active and full, yet devastatingly lonely. For on Gthawat, there were only two caste levels. You were either raised to join a collective, or you were bred to be a servant of a collective. Silta belonged to neither class, maintaining his individuality by levering his gift, acting as an intermediate for those who would pay him handsomely. He was sought after and richly rewarded. This was how he maintained his individuality and was known by many influential figures and luminaries. But that was all behind him now. What need was this service if he were the only living soul left in the universe? His only recourse, his only escape, was the self-medicating, dopamine-inducing draw of entering the half-realm for no other reason but to cheat time and the inevitable clutches of Omega. But to enter the half-realm required considerable amounts of Morricell energy, the same energy his ship needed to maintain its present course away from the event horizon. So with every passing moment, as the light behind him continued to shrink in size, the traveler was also losing his will to survive. And even though he had ample supplies and oxygen, the loneliness was simply too much. Now, pondering the quickest, most painless way to end his existence started to become a subtle obsession. Then something happened. The event horizon was no longer getting smaller. It was once again growing. But this didn't make sense. Nothing had changed. His ship had not lost any power or capability to maintain its course. The only answer was that Omega was increasing in strength. By his calculations, it would take less than 3 days before he would join his kind in their inevitable demise. So this is how it shall end, he said to himself. Despondent, he calculated how many trips he could make into the half-realm before being swallowed by the event horizon. These trips, although giving the impression of lasting for days, months, or even in some cases years, lasted only a few seconds in real time. 7 trips, he told himself. 7 more chances to find out before the end. For many years, he was forbidden to know where Perkel originated from. No one was allowed to know. Only those who joined the collective knew. But now, nothing could keep Silta from finding out the truth. Quickly, he leafed through his private records and found it. It was a place he believed would hold answers for him. It was an ancient world, one that thrived billions of years ago, long since reduced to dust by Omega. Now the only means of transport back to that world would be through the half-realm. In an instant, he was there, standing as one of them with fully extended arms and legs, only 2 eyes and flesh and bone compatible with this alien world. Although its gravity was almost twice that of Gothawit's, he felt no strain on his body, for the Morricell always made the traveler completely accustomed to each new environment. Only his garments were similar, glowing white fabric spun from fibers of the Morricell. It gave off a strange aura of orange and blue, allowing them to levitate freely. They needed this, for their true bodies were terribly atrophied from lack of movement for the last 100,000 years. But now he was alive again, walking with legs and feet, supporting his erect frame. Almost instantaneously as well, he adapted to their language and surroundings. Focusing on a male subject, he knew everything about him in a matter of seconds. His name was Maximilian Cole. He, like Silta, was searching for answers. They sat at a distance from each other in an establishment designed to ingest sustenance for their bodies. They called it a diner. Silta sat and stared at him, clearly knowing what was on his mind. Max was in pain, not physical pain, but the kind of pain that causes a being to long for simpler times, more innocent times. Max's world was on the brink of utter chaos and destruction as well. It seems the Marcel always brought Silta to view moments of crisis in whatever world or time he was being transported to. But something was very different about this place. There was no Marcel, no collectives, no tyrannical leaders, at least not yet. Something else was very different about this place. Silta felt almost naked, as if he was far too integrated and had become a physical part of this world. Then it happened. Like a spirit taking over his body, the time traveler stood up and walked slowly toward the man. As he stepped closer, Silta noticed that he could see him and was aware of him. This had never happened before. After a brief, awkward moment, Silta felt a force, a spirit of some kind that was taking over his movements and his thinking. He proceeded to talk to the man. "How long are you going to keep on running, Max?" he asked. "Excuse me? Have we met?" Silta sensed their strange connection growing stronger. Never before was a subject in the half-realm ever able to communicate with him on any level. But there it was. Both men were now engaged in a conversation that neither of them had expected, caught between two worlds in a place where time had no bearing. Silta continued to speak, but the words coming out of his mouth were not his own. He spoke of matters and phrases unfamiliar to him, of the age of grace coming to an end, of Max's true purpose and how he needed to get things straight before it was too late. "Seek him who you have despised," said Silta to the man, paralyzed by the same force that gripped Silta. Finally, Max gained enough of his reasoning to break free. The questions started coming, more than Silta could answer. But somehow he knew exactly how to respond. He told him he needed to visit another man who would answer his questions, questions that plagued him, questions about who his real father was, and questions about what he was supposed to do. "Go before it is too late. Your future, as well as many others, depends on it." With that, Silta felt that familiar tug, alerting him that his half-realm journey was about to end. So he walked out of the diner, and as he stepped out into the cold winter night, he was suddenly transported back to his present reality. Silta was confused about what had just happened as he returned to his ship, now steadily moving back into the mouth of the monster behind him. What was this place called Earth? Could this be where the Perkel Collective originated? Is this why the Marcel took him to that world? And why was he able to interact with his subject? Only 6 journeys left, and so much to learn about this strange planet, a place void of Marcel, yet so teeming with life. He had to go back to see more, but not now. Taking a journey was exhausting. He would need to rest his body and his mind before attempting another trip. After a few hours of sleep, he would try again. This next time, he would bring some Marcel with him. If for some reason he would once again interact with his subject, he wanted to find out how they would respond to something possessing power beyond their comprehension. But as he prepared himself to enter the portal, he heard a transmission from another ship. "Silta, do you read me?" hailed that familiar cacophony of voices. "Silta!" "Perkel," he answered. "It is you." Trying to sound pleased, but inwardly crestfallen, it was him. "Yes, my child, we are here. It appears we are the last of our kind. Have you been in communication with any other survivors?" "None, sir." The Perkel Collective was the largest ever assembled, more than 2,000 Gothawadans, plus thousands of other species spanning the known galaxies occupying one single brain, coexisting simply to expand their knowledge and experiences together. The collective was very old, older than the ages of Gothawodan enlightenment, dating back millions of years. It was said that Perkel had fathered many other worlds before coming to Gothawod. He had even taken Gothawodans back with him to visit these older civilizations. But in the last few million years, Omega had all but destroyed those worlds. Only Gothawod and a handful of other planets were still capable of sustaining life. But Perkel was driven to the point of obsession with only one purpose for as long as anyone could remember: to survive Omega and reestablish reign on some other new world.
We have favorable news. There is a barrier field ahead on our current course. I am transmitting my recordings of this phenomenon to you now.
Silta examined the data, but shuddered, realizing how far off it was. After making some quick calculations, he knew it was impossible to reach.
But we cannot.
Yes, we can achieve escape velocity, Silta, but it will require us to pool our resources, and it will also require
that I join your collective.
Yes, and every molecule of mass must be calculated. There is no other way, and your knowledge of how to escape the event horizon is crucial to the success of this mission.
But what evidence do you have that the barrier field will not succumb to Omega as well?
It is still a fixed distance from the event horizon. That is enough evidence. I require all the power your ship has to offer, as we are both now in a negative trajectory. We will rendezvous in 27 hours. Be prepared to surrender all control of your ship at that time. Perkel out.
27 hours. That meant Silta had less time to complete all 6 of his remaining journeys before their ETA. Somehow he knew that Perkel was aware of what he was doing. They never trusted each other. The leader was particularly not fond of anyone who could access the half-realm portal because it was something he was never able to achieve himself. The only thing that really mattered to Perkel was the Maricel and reaching the barrier field. Silta did not want to be integrated into the collective, but at this point it was inevitable. And he knew their arrival would be certainly sooner than 27 hours, but there was no way to know because Perkel's ship was still out of range. There was no time to waste. Now, as Silta prepared himself for another journey back to that ancient planet called Earth, strange words were flooding back, but these words were foreign to his nature. They held no meaning to him. Words like love, grace, faith, and hope. But even as he pondered how important they were to his subject, Max Cole, it dawned on him for the first time that hope was now something growing inside of him. For it was hope that kept him wanting to survive, even if for only a few more hours. This time the traveler knew he was being transported to another place. Some time on Earth had passed since his last visit, but this time he found himself in the middle of a global crisis, and he could feel the mayhem and madness in the air. He found himself alone in a darkened room, appearing to be someone's workspace or office. An attractive woman broke into the room abruptly, slamming the door behind her. She was out of breath, as if running away from someone. It took a moment, and then suddenly, as was the case earlier, she saw him. Frightened, she let out a scream and tried to leave, but the door would not open. Silta would soon find out why the Maricel had brought him there. And so would Gloria Five.